Good evening, everybody. Our top stories: win. That's what this president does. And somehow, no matter the momentary or persistent turmoil and turbulence that his enemies stir up, the president emerges with wins, and lots of them. This week, no different. The president prevailing against the Mueller witch hunt's corrupt efforts to distort Michael Cohen's lawbreaking as if it were Mr. Trump's. And it's not. Caravan migrants also demanding money now to not invade America. President Trump picking up support against those who want our borders and our treasury to be wide open to anyone.
The caravan has exposed problems along the border. We need to address those problems. After the caravan, the question is, do we need more border security money or less? I think most people would say more. I just think it's an unreasonable position for them to take, that $5 billion is too much, wasteful, when they voted for a lot more than that in the past. What's got me so energized here is that we've done in the past more than what the president's asking for. He's not the bad guy here.
Now, the bad guys are identified usually as radical Dems in both the House and the Senate. Despite the president's demand for $5 billion to fund that border wall, House rhinos are still pretending they have the votes to support it. Those votes do not exist in the Senate. I repeat, they do not mean anything, as they know the bill is dead on arrival once it does reach the Senate, as it would lack the 60 votes needed to stop a filibuster. And Secretary of State Pompeo setting the record straight today on the president's progress in balancing trade with China.
The president is very focused on making sure Americans get a chance to sell their products into China. It's a big market, and the president is determined to get a level playing field. I truly think we're closer, and I'm very hopeful in the next handful of weeks there'll be some good announcements.
And we take all of this up with the dean of political strategists in this country, the dean himself, Ed Rollins. And on the border, what do you do with those Central American migrants who, rather audaciously, are now demanding tribute from America to not cross our border illegally? And what price do you suppose they're demanding from the Mexican government? We'll have the latest on the caravan and the corrupt Congress that inspired the migrants' awesome sense of entitlement. We talked tonight with former acting director of ICE, Tom Homan. Our top story tonight: President Trump's week of winning, despite being assailed ceaselessly by the venomous left who inhabit much of the media. President Trump has made positive gains in trade with China as the Chinese agreed this week to lower tariffs on American-made cars. As the president claims the moral high ground on the border wall and a transparent display of strength yesterday with radical Dem leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, dismantling those fake news reports about his administration, slapping down reports he's struggling to replace his chief of staff, as he is in no hurry to do so. And being right about Brexit, of course, the weak French president, and, of course, the European Union. The European Union that is now joined with this president in seeking balanced trade with China. The strong week for this president comes despite an ongoing propaganda blitz from the left-wing national media and the radical Dems. An assault like we've never seen before. They're now sharpening knives over recent sentencing memos provided by the Mueller witch hunt, and today's conviction of the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, for making hush money payments and lying to Congress.
Does it look to you like Donald Trump knows that he's bleeped?
Oh, I think it definitely looks like he knows he's bleeped.
It is also a message that people around the president are going to prison.
This is a criminal guy. What is going to destroy everything he's ever built and his children is a 30-year dishonest criminal enterprise.
The president's attorney is going to jail. I know that we've all kind of gotten numb to all the daily chaos of this administration, but this is huge.
Are you going to call Cohen to testify before your committee before he starts that prison sentence?
Well, we are already in touch with his counsel.
What turmoil, what nonsense, and they just gin it up without so much as a blush. What are those leftist cable networks? What are they failing to mention here? Well, one of the things they're failing to mention, take note of it all, no sitting president can be indicted at any time they're in office. They also have failed to account for every sound legal mind in the country who says the Southern District of New York, the special counsel office, seem to be out of their minds and have yet to prove any collusion or wrongdoing on the part of the President of the United States.
So if he gave $1 million to two women as hush money, there would be no crime. If he directed his lawyer to do it and he would compensate the lawyer, he's committed no crime.
There's one common denominator to all of the sentencing memos. There's not a shred of evidence of Trump-Russian collusion.
Short answer is the simple no. Paying somebody for something to be quiet about something that was done or alleged years before is not a campaign expense.
I've yet to see any evidence coming from Mr. Cohen of collusion, and that's what started the Mueller investigation to begin with.
It was its charter purpose, and it's well outlived its original charter. Joining us now is Andrew McCarthy, former Chief Assistant United States Attorney in the Southern District of New York. He worked in that office for 18 years. He knows it well. He's also a National Review contributing editor, Fox Business contributor. Andy, great to see you. Let's start with this relationship among the special counsel attorneys, the Southern District of New York, the Manhattan DA. This looks like a network of hack left-wing attorneys at various levels of government who are working to assail the President of the United States, not to bring anyone to justice.
Well, I think, Lou, that you do have different groups of lawyers who are certainly have their sights set on the president. I think that the Mueller investigation is continuing to look at collusion and obstruction of justice. The Southern District of New York investigation is clearly targeting the president in connection with campaign finance violations.
You're talking about with Michael Cohen. But the very simple matter is, you have noted this in your columns, Michael Cohen's crimes are his, not the president's. There is no culpability of any kind against the president. That was a construction of a hyperbolic group of attorneys attacking the president through his once attorney. I mean, why can't people be straight about this?
If I may on that,
sure.
Look, there are two campaign finance alleged offenses to which Cohen pled guilty and in which he has implicated the president at the behest of the Southern District. It was not necessary.
When you say
for
implicated,
them to,
that word means a lot of things. To attorneys, one thing, and to the rest of us, the great unwashed.
Lou, I don't want to.
I'm not sure what it means.
I'm not looking to hide. What they're saying here is that there is a conspiratorial relationship in violation of a criminal law between Cohen and Trump. And what I am saying is it remains to be seen whether this was actually a crime or not, even if it happened the way Cohen did. I was quite surprised just a few minutes ago watching Judge Napolitano on the program right before yours say a federal judge had ruled that this was a campaign finance violation. That's not what happened at all.
Yeah.
What happened was the Southern District charged what is very dubiously alleged to be an in-kind campaign finance donation, and Cohen elected, I think for strategic reasons, to plead guilty to that charge without challenging the underlying question, which is a profound legal question about whether it actually is an in-kind contribution or not. The judge didn't rule on that.
Right.
Cohen never charged it. When a person pleads guilty in federal court, that doesn't mean that the judge has blessed every single or has ruled in the government's favor on every single conceivable objection that somebody might make to that. What happened here is the judge accepted the guilty plea. But that is not binding on President Trump. So were he ever to be charged, he would have the ability and the opportunity to argue that this is not an in-kind campaign contribution.
You're talking about, when you say he, you're talking
about
with that impersonal pronoun, you're talking about the president. Right.
Right.
But again,
in other words, Cohen's concession on this point is not binding on the president in any way.
Right.
And the media is going to continue to say again and again, and a number of other commentators are saying that there's a crime here and Trump is implicated in it. And what I'm saying is the fact that Cohen chose to plead guilty to this allegation does not establish for all purposes that it's a crime.
And what you are articulating is precisely why I raised my concern about the use of the word implicate as to the president, because implicate him in what? In what role? And how could Michael Cohen have any such presumption that he could do so? Only at the behest, as you noted, of the special counsel in the Southern District of New York, would he be asked to do so. It's showing you what if I'm going to go down a legal rat hole with anyone, I want it to be with your guidance, I assure you, Andy McCarthy. But this is such a straightforward, to me, as a layman, it is such a straightforward, preposterous, absurd, and I think villainous attempt on the part of prosecutors in the Southern District, the Mueller team, perhaps as well the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We know that the Attorney General of New York is now going to join in what is a mob rule in our Justice Department, it seems to me. Can you give us your insight as to why we should tolerate such a network of partisan, legal prosecutors in 3 levels of government going after a sitting president without any basis?
Well, let's start with where we're at. The president hasn't been charged with anything by anyone yet. And in terms
he was
of when we talk about
in a sense, if I may, Andy, he was charged with collusion. That charge has since been ultimately, it's either been removed of its own weight from the charter for this special counsel, but now moving on to all sorts of absurd abstractions and possibilities and hypotheticals, and frankly, it's a tiresome, tedious task that we have to witness when we should be, it seems to me, whether you're a U.S. attorney, whether you're the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, you should be saying, end it.
Yeah, well, I think, Lou, as you know, my objection to this at the beginning was that the Justice Department owed it to the president and, frankly, to the country to identify a crime that the special counsel was being authorized to investigate. Right. And to my mind, the crime at the beginning was this allegation of a cyber espionage conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. Once it became clear that they didn't have the evidence of that, I think the investigation should have been shut down in the criminal sense. It's perfectly fine if the FBI wants to do an investigation of Russia's threat to the United States election system. That's something that ought to be done. That's what we have an FBI for.
There's not even been a commission.
As far as a criminal investigation.
There's not even been a commission to examine
as far as a criminal investigation is concerned, once they don't have evidence of the crime that was the rationale for opening the investigation, then the investigation should end. And in a normal prosecutor's office, you don't have time to keep investigating if you don't find a crime. If you don't find a crime in the case that's assigned, you close the case and move on to the next case.
But of course, if the person who has recommended firing the FBI director is also the Deputy Attorney General of the Justice Department, and he decides at the behest of a Democratic senator and a democratically constructed fraud around a FISA warrant, he decides of his own independent judgment to go with a special prosecutor and refuses to recuse him, in which he is a witness, in which he is a prosecutor. I mean, my God, how rank and rancid the corruption in one place. Then that's the Deputy Attorney General's office of the United States Justice Department. Do you not agree?
Well, but I also think that the president's the head of the executive branch. So if the president actually thinks that what went on here with Rosenstein is corrupt, then he should fire Rosenstein. And people will hem and haw and scream obstruction about that. But he should look the American people in the eye and say, look, this is what I found. This is what I believe happened here. And I'm willing to be judged on that.
Yeah,
but he's got to run the executive branch. Yeah,
he does have to run the executive branch. And you and I both know that if he made that decision, it would not be a legal decision per se. It would be viewed as we've just been quoting and showing you the video and listening to the sound bites of the left-wing media with their hair on fire over an absolutely contrived absurdity, nothing but an artifice for another word, which is a corrupt media. Andy, we could continue this. As I say, it's been an interesting voyage down that rabbit hole. And when we emerge again, I hope it will be soon. Thanks again for joining us with your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lou.
Up next, who could forget Chuck Schumer's response to the president's travel ban? Memorable. Memorable.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
Mean-spirited? Oh, surely crying Chuck Schumer has no experience being mean-spirited. We take that up and, oh, there he is. Oh, that looks a little mean-spirited, wagging your finger and slamming your fist into the palm of your hand when you're speaking to the President of the United States. Mean-spirited? My God! We'll have much more. Ed Rollins joins us here next. Stay with us. A lot to cover tonight. Top strategist for Great America PAC, former Reagan White House political director, the sage and savant of all political strategists in this country, Ed Rollins. Great to have you here. Let's pick up with Andy McCarthy's statements. I mean, it should be over, and no one in the judicial system in power, whether it's the Chief Justice or whomever, has the guts to call it and say, come on.
Andy did a superb job of laying all that out. And the bottom line is the president is being persecuted by cable television. Every other channel, and sometimes even people here, are laying these false accusations out there and quoting false charges. There are no charges. From the start of this thing, no one has come forth with a crime that they're charging the president with, but yet they're treating him like he's a mobster. I heard people today say, it's like the mob, it's like the mafia, we've got to go shut them down.
You know, but they're right about the construction of the mob, because that is a mob across cable television, the New York Times. I mean, they call signals and everybody, starts blocking and tackling with a ridiculous predicate like the sentencing memos for a former attorney of the president's who, by the way, just happens to be going to jail for tax fraud.
And he was an idiot. I mean, the bottom line is that, if there's anything the president's guilty of, he had some bad people around him that were not doing his bidding before he became president. There's not a single person that's come forward and said, here's what this president's done since in his campaign or since he's been president.
And speaking of quote-unquote bad people, I mean, Nikki Haley today talking about, Mr. President, I really need you to do something unexpected and surprising and unpredictable, please, because we're trying to negotiate a deal. I mean, you would think she were making U.S. foreign policy. So what is wrong with this person?
Farewell interview, she goes out and she basically says, I had to tell these people we have a crazy president, and if you don't basically do what he's supposed to do, he's going to be crazy. And put sanctions on. That was the message today. I thought, my God, the presidents I've worked for that should have been fired in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, she jumped the gun and resigned before.
Well, she should leave then.
I mean, and to that point,
nobody ever leaves.
I mean, you're right. Who are these people who just will not leave? I mean, Paul Ryan, Nikki Haley. I mean, you would have thought she was some sort of foreign policy, international relations scholar from Harvard or Yale, holding forth, not the former governor of the great state of South Carolina. It's absurd.
I agree.
Let's turn to the wall funding. Where are we going with this thing? You've got Kevin McCarthy talking about funding the wall. A little late, pretty late, is the president has just, I guess nobody's paying attention to what the president said to Schumer and Pelosi. Well, we need 10 votes that are Democratic in the Senate. The rest of it's a waste of time.
We're not going to get it in the Senate, but I think the president forced the Republicans in the House to move forward the legislation. And at the end of the day here, if he has to shut the government down for a couple of days, go do it. I think it's so important to his constituents, and I think it's so important, you know, as the Hondurans now in Tijuana are saying, give us $50,000, we'll go home and start a small business.
Can you believe that? And, I mean, we have really arrived at the penumbra. No, we've crossed the penumbra of the absurd. You have entitled, misguided, unfortunate Central American migrants knocking on the doors in Tijuana that after having been promised by left-wing nonprofits and NGOs that they would be able to just march into the United States and get whatever they wanted.
And if they can't get in, they want $50,000, and they want us to overthrow the Honduran president because he's a bad guy. Thank you very much that they elected.
Well, the real question is, why in the world have successive presidents ignored Latin America and South America and all of the problems, economic and societal, that they have? And now we're looking at the Chinese that own both parts, both ends of the Panama Canal. They're now, inserting themselves into South America as well as Central America. The Russians have got 2 bombers in Venezuela, and everybody's talking about Saudi Arabia, for crying out loud.
Why aren't we having these problems on the Canadian border? Because we basically have a great relationship there, and we have good enforcement. We've not had good enforcement on the South.
You know, the Trudeau family keeps providing leadership.
They and Macron.
Yeah,
the pretty boys.
Oh, man. No further comment at this time. Ed Rollins, as always, great to have you with us. Thank you, sir. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you find it incredible the Senate and the national left-wing media are giving Saudi Arabia their full attention while ignoring Chinese and Russian intervention in Latin America? We'd like to hear what you think about this. I mean, you can't, as they say, well, you could make it up, I suppose, but it'd be far-fetched if it weren't reality. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We do want to hear your vote and see your vote, and we'll tally it up tomorrow night. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. Up next, the left-wing national media continues to operate outside reality, using yesterday's White House meeting with Chuck and Nancy to bash President Trump. You know, Mr. Transparency.
The expression, taking candy from a baby, comes to mind. This is the first time in Donald Trump's political life that he's actually had people talking back to him that actually knew what they were doing.
All Americans were likely humiliated by the buffoonery of it all. It was shocking to watch.
Republicans have no reason to actually feel good other than they're putting a lot of faith in the bluster of the president.
With everything that's going on, including the shift in power on Capitol Hill, that he's a lame duck. The Trump presidency is effectively over.
We're going to be rolling that video for the next 6 years and having a lot of fun with it. We'll be right back. Former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell joins us right after these quick messages. Stay with us. Michael Cohen sentenced today to 3 years in prison. U.S. District Court Judge William Pauley called the case a smorgasbord of criminal conduct. He said, as well, as a lawyer, Mr. Cohen should have known better than to cheat the tax authorities and to lie to, among other people, the FBI. Well, joining us now, former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell, a former president of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers and the Bar Association at the Fifth Federal Circuit. Sidney, great to have you with us. Also author of License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice. You've had a big boost and assist here from the Department of Justice with its latest rounds of toxic corruption. Good to have you here. First, using these sentencing memoranda as a predicate, a basis for the false charges against the president, even though it's innuendo, it's insinuation on their part, but they do it so dramatically and so hyperbolically that it can't help but stick in the minds of the sometimes rushed intellects of the left-wing cable networks.
Intellects is far too generous a word there, Lou. But yes, the sentencing memo was obviously drafted in complicity with the special counsel's office, because Michael Cohen is not even guilty of the election law alleged violations they craft there. Those are made up and unprecedented charges. Those are not valid election law violations. I don't think anything like that has ever been charged against anyone for the private settlement for nuisance value, what lawyers call nuisance value of private matters.
Well, nuisances, I mean, we're getting pretty used to the nuisance of a special counsel witch hunt, now in league with the Southern District of New York, and perhaps the Manhattan DA's office, now the Attorney General-elect Letitia James weighing in. She's going to start a case. Is there some sort of law against left-wing, a network of left-wing prosecutors and partisans attacking a sitting president as if they were some sort of mob? They look like organized, if it's not organized crime, it's organized persecution.
Well, at some point, it should certainly be considered an abuse of their power, because we are looking at an unprecedented abuse of authority and coordinated effort to attack this president, and relentlessly from every conceivable angle.
Can he sue? Can his attorneys do something? I mean, they seem to sit around very quietly, sitting on their hands, and occasionally, you know, getting inspired to ask for a review by the Supreme Court, you know, if enough people raise the issue. I mean, I can't get what they're doing right now.
I'm not sure either, other than I think they feel absolutely hamstrung by the relentless assault, particularly from the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Well, it belongs to the president. Why can't he grab them by the throat and say, "Let's, you know, listen up, fellas. You're working for me. You know, you're not. Come on."
I think it's I know, but I think it's the threat of obstruction of justice charges. That's why he hasn't fired Mr. Rosenstein or disclosed of FISA documents and everything. It's absolutely appalling.
Yeah, let me see if I understand this then. He's afraid. You're positing that he is afraid of being accused of obstruction of justice by the same folks who've been running a witch hunt for 2 years, that is the Justice Department and the special counsel against him, who were accusing him of collusion with the Russians, and if he interferes with what is obviously a fraudulent and horrific case of political persecution, not prosecution, by the Justice Department, by the state governments, by you name it, then he would be accused of obstruction of justice. That doesn't sound very just, Sydney.
Oh, there's nothing just about it, Lou, and I think it's even worse than that. I think he's being threatened with obstruction of justice charges if he discloses the documents that they classified to protect their own criminal conduct. Well, which is why I've been screaming for months that he disclose that information, because disclosing the truth should not be obstruction of justice. They are the ones that have obstructed justice. It is an absolute outrage. Yeah, it is criminal on their part.
Sydney?
It's been criminal from the get-go, as Mr. Comey just testified to in his congressional testimony.
We appreciate it. We got to go. Hard break. Central American migrants marching to the United States consulate in Tijuana, Mexico today, and they took with them an ultimatum. They want not only a free pass to enter the United States of America, they want $50,000 each if they decide to turn back and go home. It's called an ultimatum. This, as it appears tonight, the U.S. and Mexican governments don't even know exactly what happened to about 3,500 of the original caravan members. You can't say much more than oops at this point. Joining us tonight is Tom Homan, former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Tom, also a Fox Business contributor and great American. Tom, good to see you.
How you doing, Lou?
I'm doing all right. I'm trying to keep my sense of humor. You've got, I mean, just when I think it can't get worse, you've got Central American migrants who've been encouraged to come to our border and think they can cross with impunity. And by the way, some of them are finding out they can do that. I don't know what the percentage is. And now a group of them have been told they can expect $50,000 from the United States government. You know, I can see some of the geniuses in Congress and the Senate going, you know, really that's a good idea. We could just give it to them in cash. We wouldn't have to string this out in the form of education, public assistance programs. I mean, this is just about as crazy as it gets, don't you think?
Look, it's ridiculous. I had to read the story 3 times to see if I misunderstood something. Look,
now, can I make one caveat to protect both of us?
Sure.
We should both acknowledge, I think, here right now, very quickly, that as we sort of chuckle at this, it might happen. Who knows? As crazy as this government is.
It is crazy. We saw a lot of craziness yesterday. But look, we're not going. You know, good luck with that. We're not going to pay these folks to not violate our laws. This is just ridiculous. and if they really want their money, they need to go to the organizers of this caravan, the one that sold them a false story, the one that told them how to, you know, to beat the system. Because you can't tell me 6,000 or 7,000 people independently decided, hey, let's all join together and create a caravan. Go back to the organizer caravan and sue them. But you're not getting a dime out of this country.
Yeah, I hope you're right, because that sort of would be just the capper on it all. We've also, these 3,500 apparently we can't account for. We probably know what did happen. They probably successfully got across that border in all likelihood. Why don't we have a relationship with the Mexican government that says, secure your southern border, take responsibility for your northern border with us. We'll each share in our mutual responsibility to secure that border against terrorists, against drug dealers, the cartels. You know, there may be the real issue. The cartels have for some time now, decades, run a considerable portion of the Mexican federal government.
Absolutely, you know, and people don't want to talk about it. But first of all, you know, you and I talked about a month ago. We thought Mexico would do the right thing and stand up their southern border, but you know they didn't try very hard at it. And now they're complaining they got all these caravans here. Well, they should have did what they needed to do on their southern border, same as we do on our southern border. But you know, it's just not Mexico. Look what just happened when Trump, when the president said, you know what, you're not going to be able to claim asylum for enter illegally. Then the ACLU sues them. The Ninth Circuit says, well, you can't do that. Think about this. The president had the caravan go into a port of entry where these people are protected by federal agents. They're not going to be robbed. The women aren't going to be raped. And what the ACLU did is sue for the right to enter illegally, which puts them back in the hands of the cartels so they can be abused, and we bankroll the very criminal organizations that smuggle these people. And you're right, Lou, criminal cartels have to be paid a tax. These criminal organizations that smuggle people have to pay the cartels a tax to work through their areas. So it's all about bankrolling criminal organizations. So congratulations to the Ninth Circuit and ACLU for putting these people back in harm's way and bankrolling criminal organizations.
And thanks to this president, whose attorneys are now appealing directly to the Supreme Court to get that ruling straightened out. Thomas Holman, always great to have you with us. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. You have a good night.
You too. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you find it incredible the Senate and the national left-wing media are giving Saudi Arabia their full attention while they ignore Chinese and Russian intervention in Latin America? What happened to the Monroe Doctrine? Just asking. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Up next, British Prime Minister Theresa May survives a confidence vote. We'll tell you what that means for Brexit, the future of European socialism, and oh, by the way, the Europeans have just sided with the president. They now want China to practice balanced international trade. Another one for the president. We'll be right back. British Prime Minister Theresa May surviving a vote of no confidence, winning 200 to 117. One vote better than the previous time. Parliament can't challenge her leadership for another year. As a result, that means it's up to May to negotiate the Brexit deal with the European Union by January 21st. Good luck. And Secretary of State Pompeo confirming communist China was behind that huge hack of Marriott hotels. Pompeo telling Fox News that China is, quote, conducting espionage and influence operations here in the United States. The Marriott hack stole the information up to 500 million people. I believe the third largest cyber attack in history. Well, joining us now, Fox Business national security and foreign policy analyst, Dr. Waleed Phares. Waleed, good to have you here.
Thank you.
Fred Fleitz, former chief of staff for the National Security Council, incoming president, CEO of the Center for Security Policy. Fred, great to see you. Thanks for being here. Waleed, let's start with you. This is, the Secretary of State saying that China is conducting espionage against the United States. They've been doing it for 30 years. We know that. What kind of statement is that from the Secretary of State?
Because the Chinese are literally crossing the red lines at this point in time. I mean, 500 million persons' information has been taken by the Chinese. The other matter is that China is expanding worldwide, and it feels that it is now being met by two things. Number one, it has to choose between capitalism and communism, acting as a capitalist regime. But on the other hand, it has the United States under a different direction, under Mr. Trump, under President Trump. That is kind of creating the situation where China is acting almost irrationally.
Well, the rationality began this week, in all credit to the president, talking with White House officials, specifically Robert Lighthizer and the Treasury Secretary, Mnuchin, the Vice Premier of China, announcing that they're going to reduce tariffs, Fred, on U.S. automobiles. Now, the country went nuts when the president put 10% tariffs on Chinese products and then started cheering when the Chinese proposed to drop their tariffs from 40% on U.S. vehicles down to 15%. That's madness.
Well, it could be a significant step forward. I think it's a result of President Trump's tough diplomacy with the Chinese because of its predatory trade practices. But we have to keep the pressure up because the Chinese are going to throw us a bone and try not to change their ways, and I think that's what the president understands that.
And the Chinese, the Russians, now they're sitting in Venezuela with two bombers, the Russians are. The Chinese control both ends of the Panama Canal and want to really set up shop throughout Panama. They want to own it. They may well do so. They have loans that are coming due in Ecuador for infrastructure. The debt trap that they're creating, that they've created across Africa, they're now trying to do in the Western Hemisphere, particularly Central America and Southern America. Why are we just now reacting? I mean, we've got more people paying attention to Saudi Arabia than they are to Venezuela, to Panama, to this hemisphere where the Chinese and the Russians are making significant inroads.
We've had president after president that did not take the Chinese threat seriously. There was a hearing on Capitol Hill today where China was identified as the most serious long-term threat to the United States. Now, President Trump knows that, but we've had president after president that did not want to deal with this threat, let China take advantage of us over and over again concerning trade. So, I mean, we've talked about this before, Lou. This challenge to fix the economic situation is enormous. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of pressure, and we're going to have to endure some pain to fix it.
I don't know what endure pain means, but I do know one thing that you said disturbs me mightily. It's going to take a long time. This country has demonstrated and demonstrated again that we don't have patience, that we're not good at long wars. Ask anyone who's served in Afghanistan, who has fought the wars in Iraq, who is engaged now in trying to contend with the Chinese and the Russians. Long wars, we should fix them fast.
With one point, Lou, is that China has two advantages. It doesn't have elections, doesn't worry about the opposition, basically, and it is coordinating with Russia. It is coordinating with Iran, and that's what our media should see much clearer.
And these claims by the Washington Post that the president still has a rupture with the intelligence agencies, fake news, tell us what the straight deal is.
Well, this is a great story. Greg Miller of the Washington Post called me and said he wanted to talk about this problem between the president and the intelligence community. And I said, well, Greg, actually, this problem's been fixed. John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, Senator Haspel, they have solved the problem that was caused by these political intelligence analysts who've been attacking the president, leaking intelligence. You know what John Brennan was doing, smearing the president over and over again? But Miller